All right, let's dive right into today's explainer and unpack a highly controversial, super esoteric text that frames our entire world and literally everything that happens on it as an extraterrestrial civilization experiment. Today we're digging into a translated source titled Remote Viewing: The Dark Side of the Moon. Now, this text presents a deeply unconventional worldview claiming to reveal secrets completely hidden from humanity. We're going to strictly examine the claims made here, basically stepping inside the author's framework to understand how they view human history, because to them it's not a natural progression at all. Instead, it's a heavily monitored cosmic laboratory.
So, according to the source material, we really need to flip our entire perspective upside down. Imagine for a second that Earth isn't just our planet, right? The text claims it's actually a testing ground, closely watched and managed by highly advanced alien entities. It essentially asks us to suspend our conventional understanding of history and biology, proposing that the major events shaping humanity are really just controlled variables in an ongoing, multi-generational study being run by beings from beyond our world.
The author hits us with this core premise right out of the gate. They paint this picture of a totally orchestrated reality where our existence is heavily monitored and manipulated from the shadows. The text explicitly uses the phrase experiment site to describe Earth. In this framework, human bodies are essentially just vessels. The experiences we go through, the struggles, the triumphs, the very act of living, they're all just part of a cosmic training program or trial. The extraterrestrials are depicted as observers and instigators, basically just watching how these souls perform under the very specific conditions of Earth.
Okay, so how do these entities actually operate? The text breaks it down into two totally distinct methods of intervention. On one side, we have macro-level events. These are massive, global occurrences, like the deliberate release of viruses for population control. And then on the other side, we have micro-level interventions. These are deeply personal, involving the abduction of individuals for genetic harvesting and physical experimentation. The author posits that both of these scales are absolutely crucial for the aliens to gather the data and the physical resources they need from our world.
Section 1. Population Control and Viruses. Let's start with that macro level first and see how the text explains some of the absolute darkest chapters in human history, recontextualizing global pandemics within this extraterrestrial framework. The author takes a known historical tragedy, the Black Death, and frames it not as a natural pandemic, but as a calculated extraterrestrial experiment. The text claims that historical plagues were essentially early tests. They weren't accidents of sanitation or nature, but intentional introductions of pathogens to observe exactly how humanity reacts when faced with a sudden catastrophic population collapse. The source material actually claims these massive mass casualty events are deliberate tests to gauge our resilience. It's treating human survival almost like a cosmic game of poker. By introducing a virus that humanity has literally no natural immunity to, these observers are allegedly just watching to see our response. Will the population be entirely wiped out, or will we adapt, develop medical countermeasures, and somehow survive? The text describes this as a brutal but highly calculated civilization experiment to test the absolute limits of our species.
And the author brings this right up to modern times, suggesting that viruses like AIDS are introduced to observe whether the human race can adapt today or if it will be wiped out. The text explicitly names AIDS as a contemporary version of the plague experiment. It argues that unseen forces release these modern viruses to continue challenging our medical infrastructure and our biological durability, just constantly gathering data on our survival mechanisms.
Section 2. Genetic Experiments and Abductions. All right, zooming in from massive global pandemics, the text shifts focus to the micro level, the deeply personal and physical violations of the individual. This is where the source explains the terrifying accounts of alien encounters. Now, we really need to define abduction exactly as it is framed in this book. It is explicitly described as a biological harvesting operation, rather than just capturing humans for casual study. The author insists that when individuals are taken, it is for a very specific utilitarian purpose, to extract human genetic material, specifically eggs and sperm. They aren't just observing us, they are physically taking the building blocks of our reproduction. According to the text, these entities are basically running a massive laboratory to study how humans live, adapt, and reproduce on this planet. They're deeply interested in human ecology. By conducting crossbreeding experiments, they are trying to figure out how to modify or create a physical form that can actually thrive in Earth-specific environment. They're analyzing us from every possible angle to decode the secrets of our biological success.
And the methodology they supposedly use? It sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie.
The source details conversations asserting that primitive teleportation tech is used to pull subjects directly into these cosmic research facilities. Humans are supposedly captured using transfer devices, beaming them directly onto spacecraft. Once there, they undergo these intense genetic and biological studies, acting as unwitting donors to a massive overarching scientific endeavor.
Section 3. Creation of Next Earthlings.
So all of this really brings us to the ultimate question, right? Why? Why harvest this material and run these global experiments in the first place? What's the end game here? Well, the text lays out a clear, multi-generational agenda. They are systematically extracting our traits to construct the perfect biological vessel for themselves. It's a literal step-by-step process. First, they gather the raw material through abductions. Then, they study it to understand Earth's harsh environment. Finally, they use that knowledge to engineer a totally new type of body, a hybrid or modified form that the text refers to as the next Earthling.
The author claims that without proper physical adaptation, alien souls simply cannot handle being on Earth, meaning they are using our DNA to build a bridge for their own planetary migration. And the source notes a really fascinating detail here. Apparently in the past, when these entities tried to come to Earth in bodies that weren't adapted, many of them actually went mad. To survive here, they realize they can't just take over as they are. They absolutely must absorb our genetic traits and literally build a new physical form that can withstand our world, paving the way for a mass migration.
Leaving you to ponder this incredibly esoteric worldview, we really have to ask, if we are just subjects in an ongoing biological trial, what exactly happens when the results are finally in? If viruses are just tests of our endurance and our DNA is simply raw material being used to engineer our replacements, what is the ultimate fate of the current human race once the next Earthling is actually ready to take the stage? It's a chilling paradigm for sure, one that forces us to question our agency, leaving us to wonder if we're the masters of our own destiny or simply an outdated control group in a cosmic laboratory.